Got a couple million people worldwide that we track and measure everything that they do, so that's where all this data comes from. So what are we going to talk about today? The growing social display market. Guess what? It's big, but why does it matter what's actually happening out there? Then we'll talk about advertiser interaction. Just want to give you guys a sense, some lingo that I'm going to go through when I talk about socially enabled versus socially published, things of that nature. Analyzing paid social, so we even talk about some companies, what's happening, big brands, who's doing what. And then I actually have an interesting little case study on Bud Light, because as everybody wants to know, these guys just talked about it, what type of value does this actually have? Do Facebook friends, do fans, does that actually matter? How does it all impact? What were the results? So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So the social display market, just a couple stats for you guys to get a sense of where things are, how important is social media these days. Last, the past, basically call it 10 months, there was a little over 1 trillion total display ads that were served on social networking sites, and that's just here in the United States. And you can see over the course of the past year, that left-hand graph, we're looking at about 1/3 of all ads that are delivered, like all display ads in the United States are delivered on social networking sites. And you can see on the right-hand side there, in fact, why is that important? Is simply because at this stage, social networking has about a 95% reach. There are still 5 out of 100 people that do not touch social networking in any way. I'm actually not sure who those people are at this stage. But, what can I say? I'm hanging out in New York and everybody is kind of wired in all the time. But you can see 43 of the top 100 display advertisers had over 20% of their impressions were on social networking sites as of August. So they even talked about a little bit earlier, like, it's the big brands, the ones that begin to drive stuff and then things begin to move. We're finally seeing that, right? We're going to talk a little bit later on. Social networking, not really about direct response, it's about brand dollars and like what's going to be happening there, and a lot of this data backs that up. So just some other quick stats, some highlights to be able to throw things out for you guys. 34 of the top 100 advertisers published ads, and people clicked through, like when they physically clicked on stuff, they clicked through to social networking sites. Again, this is all from August data. Nearly 3 billion display ad impressions would click to social networking sites overall. So click-through rates, again, not big on them, not a great way to be able to judge value of stuff. But that said, when you have socially enabled ads where you're inviting people to take an action, follow me, Facebook me, etc. And again, we'll talk about those in a minute. We're actually seeing some real, some real attribution that's happening. And you can see Google, we've all heard of Google, kind of a big deal, right? 75% of the ads will become socially enabled by 2015. That's one of their big predictions. I actually believe that, right? As far as, the direction of where things are moving, what we're seeing as far as the number of socially enabled ads, I definitely feel that even might be conservative. So let's talk about 3 different ways when you think about social media. Just wanted to put up a couple examples, different types of things that companies are doing. In this example, I use Virgin America. Anybody here flown them? Right, I'm a big fan, by the way, so that's why I use this. But a couple things when you think about the different types of platforms and the engagements that go on. I just like to put up a Facebook one. You have a Facebook page here. You could talk about having contests, different ways to include and have an interaction. And again, I'll just go by this quickly because I think you guys are pretty familiar. Twitter, having a conversation, being able to, whether it be offer people, coupons to be able to engage with your customers. Somebody gets mad at American Express, they could immediately respond about that type of thing. And then also the other piece here is that type of cross-platform media. You can see that little American Express, the item icon up there. Certainly your ability to transfer American Express points and interact. The point is there's a lot of different things you're able to do through social media. But, and you can see, by the way, the bottom one is socially published ads, right? That's also ads from Facebook. Just a lot of different ways for you guys to be able to think about how people are using this. So the other point I'll make is I just wanted to put up some of these creatives that we see at this stage, there's so many ways that companies are, the new creatives where they're involving like the socially enabled stuff. You can see, click here, go to Twitter, follow me on Facebook. Let's see the Fergie one, view the Facebook gallery. Like there's a lot of different ways. I just like to put these up because these are becoming incredibly ubiquitous. Not to mention just a couple of the creatives that we see on Facebook, the State Farm and McDonald's. So last thing with lingo, and then we'll actually talk about stats. Just when I talk about socially enabled, you can see the Lifesavers one on the left-hand side. It's inviting you to take an action. If you click there, it'll physically take you to Facebook, so you're driving traffic not into your own walled garden, but into somebody else's. So that type of media. But I just want to get a sense when I talk of socially enabled, that's what I mean. And then socially published on the right-hand side. Again, pretty straightforward ads that were on Facebook. That actual ad, in fact, when you clicked on it, did take you to their Facebook page. So not really that important. I just like to point that out. It's interesting. It doesn't always take you away. But just to keep in mind when I talk about stuff, that's how I'm mentioning it. So what's happening in paid social display advertising? A couple ways I want to look at it. So let's talk about socially enabled impressions. You guys can see Mars Incorporated, Group Danone, some of the big boys that are here. The reason I highlighted those, Mars, in fact, is the largest at this stage. You can see with about 297 million of their impressions during the month of August were socially enabled, which actually made up about 30%, of their overall total. And then I bring up Group Danone there, having about 68 million, but that was almost 80% of everything that they had delivered. And that's really, you guys, the big thing I want you to see on that list. It's all about brands, right? It's not direct response advertisers for the most part. You don't go in, buy some mac and cheese online. Well, I live in New York, so maybe I do that sometimes. Anybody here have their groceries delivered? It's weird, right? But I do it. So the point is, you guys, we're seeing a lot of this, some really heavy interaction from the brands, a lot of brand dollars. And this is just the top 10, like some of the big boys. You're going to continue to see this. A rising tide lifts all boats. I think even smaller companies are going to continue to do this to drive that type of engagement. So just a few things and a few numbers I'd like to point out for you guys. Several billion, as we can see across the board. But then also, what about advertising that's being done on social websites? So you can see who are the big players: AT&T, Experian. That's really a lot of like free credit report stuff. IAC, Match, Twinkie. You can see just across the board some of the total number of impressions that are being delivered. Again, these will send people to both their branded websites, like their actual websites they own, as well as their different social media sites and things like that, within Facebook pages or whatever it's going to be. AT&T is interesting. I just like to point them out because they, in fact, were the first display advertiser. Has anybody ever seen that creative before? It's one of the funniest looking little display creatives I've ever seen. It's really busy and ugly and lots of colors and lots of words and stuff. But the first display advertiser, but in fact, you can see also the biggest as it relates to social networking, and in fact, the biggest on the entire internet. But you can see you start to get a few different types of companies when you're getting into, not necessarily needing to have a conversation, but directing people and just doing advertising on social networking. So you tend to see different types of organizations. So just a few things to think about in the industry. But Procter & Gamble, somebody like both, that does both socially enabled and social networking, places where you could actually drive a conversation. Just an important factor and sort of a future movement as you see, why this stuff is important. Excuse me. And then the last thing I'd like to point out, just granularity is key. If you're going to be thinking about and analyzing things that are competitive, or you're going in to get together with a particular brand, it's not just about their entire company. It's about being able to determine which types of their products or which of their services, do you want to have a social engagement? What type of conversation do you want to have? You can see here 3 Musketeers combos. May seem like the same thing, junk food, right? But a couple different things in the ways that they deliver and they will interact. So I just like to point that out, that it's not everything is created equal. So if you are, who in here is from an agency? Right? Most everybody. So if you're going in to have this conversation, you don't want to just come in and be like, social, Facebook. You want to be able to sit down, talk about some of their individual products and how things might differ depending upon which part of their brand you're going to be working with or you're trying to work with. The last thing, how are we for time, by the way? Pretty good? Talk a lot. Sometimes I run long. I want to make sure. So Bud Light, I just want to talk about this. Anybody here drink Bud Light? Heard of Bud Light? You've seen a few commercials before? Right. So Bud Light actually had a very interesting, kind of a fun campaign over the summer, which I'll take you through in one sec. But I did want to be able to just give you a sense of what was happening with Bud Light and what some of the numbers were. So, we cross-referenced Bud Light drinkers online. We have access to Kantar CPG segments. So I just wanted to be able to put this up to give you a sense of where people that drink Bud Light, where do they currently spend their time. You can see, Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, et cetera. And each of those also include like all of the roll-ups, right? So like Google Sites includes YouTube and things like that. And in July and August, it's basically the same top 5. Maybe they switched up as far as volume goes. But just wanted to give you a sense of like where those people are spending their time and how we're going to match this up with their social networking, what they were doing with their social networking. So where have they been doing, what have they been doing with display advertising? Just also to give you a sense of just sort of total, right? You can see anywhere from 100 million plus, give or take, impressions in any given month over the course of the past year. Relatively consistent. They're doing a lot of stuff, but how much of that has been social in nature? And that's really where we get into what was happening with them over the summer. So the top Bud Light social ad publishers, so this is where, where are they placing the most display ads? You guys can see Facebook, pretty much the only one, right? When it came into July, it was the only thing that they were pushing. And then you can see down there on the bottom in August, they did move on to socially published ads that were being delivered, on Facebook as well and on AOL. But you can see nothing on like Google Plus and some of the other things. They were pretty focused as far as what they were doing. So the point here, and before I get a little bit deeper, is you don't want to just shotgun approach it, right? You got to be able to pick what you want. And I know Facebook is relatively shotgun approach. That said, it's really about what they were doing and what was happening and the type of engagement that they were looking to drive. So, Bud Light's Port Paradise 4 campaign. Anybody heard of this? Anybody know what this is? So this is about like a fun party cruise that you basically can go on, private island, this type of thing. And you can see it was a sweepstakes-centric campaign, and they did both advertising on Facebook, but also had tons of socially enabled ads. And when you would click on that socially enabled ad, it would take you to the Facebook page, and then you would be there and you would sign up and potentially become a Bud Light person and then be partying on partying on the cruise and the private island. And you can see just as far as some of those numbers go, 86% of their July impressions, which was 72% of their July ad spend, in fact, when you add it all together, was on one of the top 30 publishers visited by the Bud Light purchasers. So they were definitely making sure to match up what was where people that drink Bud Light, where they spend their time with these socially enabled ads and the socially published stuff. So just keep that in mind as well, that you want to be able to hit people in the right way. You don't just want to throw it out there and just expect that you'll get folks. If you are a Bud Light drinker, you're going to engage with them. That's really helping with like a lot of this targeting and the different things that were going on. And then you can see the display impressions, how many of them were social during the campaign. You're running at 90% in July, 60% in August, 90% and 60% July. So the idea there again is that they were basically doubling down on such a thing in order to drive the engagement. But the question becomes, did it actually work, right? Did they find enough people? Were they having the right reach? And then did they have the right engagement? And in this instance, just to give you a sense as far as the paid spend went, you could see they were able to reach over 26 million unique visitors across 29 different publishers in July. And actually, when they slowed down as of August, they still had and were reaching about 16 million unique visitors over 31 different publishers. So, pretty good reach, right? That's a lot of people, but also targeted. Not everybody's a Bud Light drinker. Not everybody's, wants to go on like a party cruise with the young kids. So then, what else did the paid social advertisement do? Right, this is then the last piece. So we all know about advertising and reach, and you want to get people, and you want engagement and all that type of stuff. But their Facebook presence actually spiked. So it was like, they were able to accomplish exactly what they were looking for. They wanted to get people to engage, to drive them to the Facebook page. So again, it wasn't just for kicks, it wasn't just for whatever. It was to be able to get people to follow you, to become your friend or your fan. So what's interesting here is like, the paid social, the idea of it, is, again, the whole theme of this thing is paid meeting earned, right? So it's one thing to go out there, we could all bid on stuff, or we could all, pay for display impressions, etc. But in the end, a fan, and then even more importantly in this instance, friends of fans, there is great value to those. We have a product, that analyzes the value of like social, whether it be like fans and friends and followers and things like that. And you can see here, in the blue line there, Bud Light fans definitely, they're engaged. Those are the people they want to be having the conversation with. But it was during that heavy July campaign when they were driving up the impressions. The fact that they were also reaching all of the fans of those, the friends of those fans, the engagement, the value of that, the exposure that you have there, and then their ability to maintain people that like their brand and whatnot. It was actually, they were driving people where they needed to go. They were able to have that conversation, and then they were able to continue to do that, through the news feed, more or less, for anybody that was, a Facebook fan friend, right? I always mix that up. I keep getting it backwards. So the point was, in the numbers, we actually saw it working. And depending upon what your success metrics are, this is an example of this actually working. So I would not, sometimes people just are like, oh, I don't know if that worked. I wasn't really sure. This is definitely something that we saw in the numbers where it was playing out and they were getting what they wanted. So the final key takeaways, and then I'd be happy to answer some questions. You can see advertisers are increasingly using social media. Surprise, surprise, but it's happening because it's working, right? We've reached a stage where there's not necessarily as much, let's call it just throw it against a wall and see what sticks. But once the big brand advertisers are getting involved, and these are like where the real dollars come from, considering that brand advertising is 2/3 of all advertising spend across the planet. So let's just keep in mind that those are the ones that are really driving this. The other part, social display ad strategies combined with social sites and the different things you're doing can actually drive great brand awareness. So it's not just, hey, there's a lot of brand, there's a lot of people, but we're seeing it in the statistics that this is working and getting you the getting you the activities and the latent results that you guys are looking for. And there's a lot of different tools that are out there to help you fully analyze this. So I just say you don't want to just go ahead and do it and not track it. Whether it be Google Analytics or all the different types of things, anything that you guys can do to be able to get some stats around your engagement, how you're doing, how you look versus your competition, I highly recommend investing or at least looking at some of the free stuff and different white papers that exist out there. And that is it. Questions?
Do we have any questions? Oh, okay.
I answered everything, that's it?
No, I have a question. I have a question, Neil.
It's true.
No. Well, among my questions, I actually had two. One is whether you and maybe you haven't been able to measure this yet, whether you saw higher engagement levels out of socially enabled versus socially published. Is there any kind of thing you can say about that yet? Yes or no?
Well, I don't have like an overall stat, but I'll say this, something that's socially enabled inherently has an action that it's asking you to take, right? So certainly if you're talking about the engagement of did I click through or did I actually go ahead and follow that and check out their Facebook page later, by all means that had like higher engagement, but it also depends on what it was that you're looking for, so.
Yeah, and I also wondered with the Budweiser stat, there was something that was maybe like the fourth or fifth slide from the end where the percentage of engagement to the friends of fans, so to speak, was much higher. There were more impressions in July, but still it was like fivefold versus twofold or something like that. And I kind of wondered if you knew what was the difference between what they were promoting in July versus August, or why that why that metric was so much higher in July.
It was directly as a result of like the number of impressions and things that were being served in July. I mean, it was exponentially larger than what they were doing in August as they began to dial it back because they were reaching like the end and like the sweepstakes. You got to eventually close it and shut it down, right? Asked me a story, by the way, when I won a sweepstakes in cat food one time. Actually won money. It was kind of funny. And they sent me the cash. But anyway, that's the point. Yeah. It was, it was very heavily driven by as a direct result of the advertising.
Yeah, because I would think that exponential is exponential in the sense, and so it's maybe if you had 100,000 impressions with fans in August, it would be fivefold, and it would also be fivefold possibly in July, but that's not what you saw, obviously.
No, I mean that was again, it just goes right back to the number of impressions. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like a one-to-one and exact. It was just a whole lot more impressions that led to a whole lot more engagement from like the friends of fans because as they're pushing things out, that's being put in everybody's newsfeed, and that's those friends of fans that are seeing it.
Yeah. I also, does anybody have a question? Because I have yet another one. Yeah. Okay.
I'm just curious. When you talk about display, are you bucketing in video to that too, or is video completely separate, or how do you?
Video is completely separate. Like that's a whole nother thing. I spoke at video yesterday on something else. But again, I'd be happy to give you a card and I could share with you some of those details on what's happening in video as well. I have, by the way, a great free white paper, I promise, called The Power of Like, where we got together with Facebook and helped define the value of friends and the Facebook friends and the fans and that type of stuff. So feel free to come up, take a card. I'd be happy to share that with you guys.
No question. So I'm from New York as well, and so on the subways I'm starting to see traditional media like posters on the 6 train that are now socially enabled.
Sure.
Curious about your thoughts on traditional outlets being socially enabled.
As in, do we see it happening a lot, or just is it a good idea, that type of thing?
Yeah.
I think, we're seeing it happen a lot more often. I think anecdotally we all see that. I'm on the 6 train as well, right? But as far as like things you see on TV and the different types of things that are going on, you're starting to pick it up in also the non-web stuff, right? Because they know you have your iPad, they know you have your phone. I mean, this goes back to like QR codes, right? Just the ability to come up and take this, that little squiggly square. You guys have seen that? That's a QR code. So we're seeing more of it. I just think that it's going to take a little bit more time, in order for that to happen. But I don't have like a good stat on it as far as as far as it goes. But I think it's a good idea, right? I'm a big believer in stacking up your creative so that you're seeing like the same type of thing. The more impressions you see, the more it sticks with you. The Old Spice guy.
Any other questions? Okay, my last question was getting back to that Google 75% stat. Is that display, or are we going to somehow enter socially enabled text ads? Are those going on?
Well, first of all, that was about display, right? That 75% of display ads by 2015 would be socially enabled, which again, I think in the end is probably going to end up being a conservative estimate. As far as search is concerned, I will say this, something that's been a very interesting, if we connect together search and social, is that for the first time over the course of the past year, you've seen, if you go ahead and run a search for a brand, what's the first website that shows up? The brand's website, right? But in that top 10, as a result of how much traffic and how many friends and how many fans and those different things that those social networking sites get, usually within that top 10 for any given brand, you'll also see Facebook.com/Macy's and Twitter.com/Macy's and that type of thing. So there's been a lot of focus as well on optimizing for search on top of all of this stuff, because search is so interspersed with all of this, right? Because you end up seeing a display ad, now you're more likely to search on that brand at a later time. These things don't exist in silos. So we're seeing a lot more of that as well, like search traffic and actually paid search traffic, where somebody's directing you to their Facebook page in conjunction with all this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Eli.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Okay. So